The moving truck hadn't even finished backing into my driveway when 3 police cruisers pulled up, surrounding it as though they were responding to a high-stakes bank robbery. Their sirens were silent, but red and blue lights flickered across the quiet suburban street like a warning. Through my side mirror, I saw one officer step out and lift a megaphone. "Sir, please step away from the vehicle and keep your hands visible." I set down my coffee, climbing out slowly with my hands raised, not out of fear but confusion. That's when I saw her. Margaret Peaton, president of the Maple Ridge HOA, stood proudly on her perfectly manicured lawn, dressed in a lavender pantsuit and gripping her phone like it was a weapon of mass destruction. Her lips were moving rapidly, no doubt narrating every second to whoever was unlucky enough to be on the other end of that call. The lead officer approached, and I caught the faintest smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Are you Nathan Brooks?" he asked. "That's me," I replied, keeping my tone steady despite how absurd this all felt. "The one with the permits for the tiny home installation?" Margaret's self-satisfied expression evaporated faster than you could say homeowners association. The officer extended his hand with a grin. "Officer Mike Garrett, we got a report about quote-unquote suspicious activity involving an illegal structure, but I've got your permit approvals right here on file. My name is Nathan Brooks, and at 35, I thought I'd seen enough corporate nonsense to last a lifetime. After a decade climbing the tech ladder, I'd saved enough to finally chase my dream of sustainable living. The plan was simple: buy a small plot of land, install an eco-friendly tiny home, and work remotely while reducing my carbon footprint. The land I bought sat on Cedar Creek Lane, technically within Maple Ridge's boundaries, but crucially not under their HOA restrictions. It was a grandfathered parcel, excluded from the original HOA due to some long-forgotten property dispute. That detail would soon prove very important. Margaret Peaton had ruled Maple Ridge for 15 years, her authority ironclad but wrapped in velvet. At 58, she treated the neighborhood like her private kingdom, enforcing rules about everything from grass height to mailbox colors and even the correct angle for displaying the American flag. She once fined a family $200 because their garden gnome was, quote, facing the wrong direction, unquote. I wasn't moving in a frat house or a business operation, just a well-built, aesthetically pleasing tiny home that met every county code and regulation. To most people, it looked like a quaint little cottage. To Margaret, it was apparently the architectural equivalent of a declaration of war. The trouble began 2 weeks before my move-in date. I was leveling the foundation when Margaret appeared, clipboard in hand, radiating disapproval like a suburban specter. "Excuse me," she said in a tone that suggested she'd never excused anyone for anything. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I straightened and wiped my hands. "Installing the foundation for my home." "I'm Nathan Brooks. I own this lot." Her eyes narrowed behind her designer glasses. "This is a traditional single-family neighborhood. We have standards." "Good thing I'm not part of your HOA, then," I replied pleasantly, returning to my work. The silence that followed was thick enough to spread on toast. When I looked up again, she was furiously typing on her phone, either summoning her flying monkeys or checking property records. "Possibly both. This won't stand," she snapped, marching off in her sensible heels. Over the next 2 weeks, Margaret launched a full-scale suburban offensive. First came the letters, one delivered to my apartment every day, each one more passive-aggressively threatening than the last. Some warned me about neighborhood character. Others cited HOA bylaws that didn't even apply to my property. Then came the in-person harassment. She'd appear every time I was at the lot, standing just beyond the property line, recording videos while narrating like a deranged documentarian. "Day 4 of the illegal construction," she'd announce. "The perpetrator continues to show blatant disregard for community standards." She even organized an emergency neighborhood meeting, complete with a slideshow titled "Tiny Houses and Tiny Values." According to my soon-to-be neighbor Tom, who attended out of morbid curiosity, she used doctored photos to make my future home look like a dilapidated shack. She warned that tiny homes attract undesirable elements and could compromise the moral fabric of Maple Ridge. The Thursday before my move-in, she escalated again. I arrived to find the lot surrounded by orange cones and caution tape with a hand-painted sign reading, "Construction halt ordered by HOA." I called the county inspector, who confirmed no such order existed and even sounded amused. "Is this Margaret Peaton again?" He sighed. "That woman's called our office 17 times this month. When I removed the cones and tape, Margaret appeared within minutes, as if she'd been hiding in the bushes. Waiting, those are official HOA markers," she shrieked. "You're tampering with official markers." "Margaret," I began, keeping my voice as steady as possible, "your HOA has no jurisdiction here. I've already shown you the property maps and the county's approval. What more do you need?" Her face turned an alarming shade of purple. "I want you to respect this community. I want you to understand that we've spent years maintaining a certain standard of living." That was when she made her biggest mistake. She stepped onto my property, jabbing her finger at my chest. "You will not destroy everything we've built with your hippie shack." I took a step back. "Please leave my property, Margaret." "You're trespassing," she laughed. Actually laughed. "Trespassing? I'm protecting property values. I'm performing my civic duty, and I'm asking you to leave. This is your only warning." Then she stormed off, but not before promising I would rue the day I crossed her. I had no idea how literal that threat would turn out to be, which brings us to move-in day. As Officer Garrett explained the situation, it became clear that Margaret had called 911, claiming she'd witnessed armed individuals unloading suspicious cargo into an illegal structure. She had apparently told dispatch she feared for her safety and for the safety of the neighborhood children. "Armed individuals?" I repeated, gesturing toward my moving crew, 2 college kids and a 60-year-old man named Earl, who was currently taking a smoke break. "That's what she claimed," Officer Garrett said, shaking his head. "Said you were establishing some kind of compound. Possible cult activity was even mentioned." By then, 2 more officers had arrived. I recognized one of them immediately, Jake Harrison. His face lit up. "Nathan! Man, I heard you were moving back to town. Is this your place?" He turned to Officer Garrett. "This guy and I went to high school together. He's definitely not starting a cult." Margaret had crept closer during this exchange, close enough to hear every word. Her expression shifted rapidly, from disbelief to anger to desperation. "Officers, you don't understand," she said, her tone suddenly pleading. "This structure hasn't been approved by the HOA's Architectural Committee. It's completely out of compliance with our CC&Rs. Officer Garrett gave her a look of thinly veiled irritation. "Ma'am, we've been over this. Mr. Brooks's property isn't part of your HOA. He's followed all county regulations, and his permits are in order." "But the aesthetics," she wailed. "Property values," Garrett cut in, "are not a police matter. However, making false emergency reports is." The color drained from Margaret's face. "False? I was genuinely concerned." "You reported armed individuals and suspicious cargo," Jake said evenly. "All I see are moving boxes and furniture. You also mentioned possible cult activity. That's a serious allegation." Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "I was being cautious." "You can't be too careful these days." Officer Garrett flipped open his notebook. "Ma'am, I'll need to see some identification." "Making false reports to emergency services is a misdemeanor, punishable by fines up to $1,000 and up to 6 months in jail." "Jail?" Her voice cracked. "You can't be serious." "I'm on the HOA board." "I'm a pillar of this community. Being on an HOA board doesn't entitle you to waste emergency resources," Garrett replied coolly. 3 units responded to this call. That's 3 units that couldn't respond to actual emergencies. As Margaret fumbled for her ID with trembling hands, I noticed curtains twitching in nearly every window along the street. The neighborhood was getting quite a show. A few people had even stepped out onto their driveways for a better look, including Tom, who gave me a discreet thumbs up. "I demand to speak to your supervisor," Margaret blurted, trying to reclaim some authority. "That can be arranged," Garrett said evenly. "Down at the station, after we process you for filing a false report." "Process me?" Her voice climbed to a pitch that probably set off dogs 3 blocks away. "I'm being arrested?" "Not arrested," Jake clarified, "yet. But you will need to come with us to the station. You can either come voluntarily, or we can make it official." Margaret's gaze darted around wildly, searching for backup from the onlookers. Finding none, she turned her glare on me, her eyes burning with venom. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Actually, ma'am, it kind of is," Garrett replied. "Mr. Brooks, would you like to press charges for harassment?" "I understand this isn't the first incident," I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes, to end this once and for all, but I also had to live here. "Not at this time," I said. "I just want to move into my home in peace." Margaret was escorted to a police car, her protests echoing down the street. "This is persecution. I was protecting our community. You'll all regret this when property values plummet." As the cruisers drove off with her in the back of one, the spectators began to drift away. Tom strolled over and offered his hand. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Nathan." "Sorry about all that. She's been a terror for years." "Thanks," I said, shaking his hand. "Hopefully things calm down now," Tom laughed. "Oh, I wouldn't count on that. But hey, at least it'll be interesting." The movers, who'd watched the entire fiasco with a mix of amusement and disbelief, got back to work. Within a few hours, my tiny home stood fully set up on its foundation. Nothing like the ramshackle disaster Margaret had described to anyone who'd listened. That evening, as I sat on my new porch watching the sunset, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Thought you'd want to know? Peyton was fined $800 for the false report. She tried to pay with an HOA check." The treasurer wasn't pleased. I couldn't help smiling. Sometimes karma moves fast in the suburbs. The next morning brought fresh drama. I was enjoying my coffee when Tom knocked on my door, practically vibrating with excitement. "Emergency HOA meeting tonight," he said. "Word is, they're voting on Margaret's position already. Apparently this was the last straw. She's been using HOA funds for personal vendettas, sending cease and desist letters to people who aren't even in the HOA. The lawyer fees alone this year are astronomical." That evening, I could see the clubhouse from my porch, lit up and packed with what looked like the entire neighborhood. I wasn't invited, of course, not being a member, but Tom texted me updates. They're listing complaints. It's like a suburban Festivus. Someone just brought up the garden gnome incident of 2019. Oh, snap. The treasurer just presented the legal bills. $37,000 this year alone? And then the final text, she's out. Unanimous vote. She just threw her gavel at the wall and stormed out. I watched from my porch as Margaret's car peeled out of the clubhouse parking lot, her tires squealing in protest. The other attendees filed out more slowly, many of them chatting and laughing, a weight seemingly lifted from the collective shoulders of Maple Ridge. The aftermath was swift and thorough. Within a week, Margaret received formal notice of her removal from the HOA board. Her special parking space at the clubhouse was revoked. Her key to the community pool was deactivated. The landscape company she'd hired her nephew to run was replaced with a more affordable service. But the real blow came when the HOA's lawyer sent her a demand letter for reimbursement of the legal fees she'd incurred pursuing actions. Outside the HOA's jurisdiction, $37,000, due within 30 days. I heard about her reaction from Tom, who heard it from his wife, who was in the grocery store when Margaret received the certified letter. Apparently, she stood in the cereal aisle for a full 5 minutes, staring at the paper while muttering, "This can't be legal," over and over, before dropping her basket and leaving without buying anything. The next day, a for sale sign appeared in Margaret's yard. According to the real estate listing, it was priced for a quick sale. The description mentioned, quote, "motivated seller," unquote, which, in real estate speak, meant desperate. I was watering my small garden when Margaret drove by one last time, her car loaded with boxes. She slowed as she passed my property, and our eyes met. For a moment, I thought she might stop, might say something, but then she hit the gas and was gone. Tom told me later she'd moved 3 towns over and was renting a condo with, ironically, an even stricter HOA than Maple Ridge. "I heard she tried to run for their board," he said with a grin. They Googled her. She didn't get a single vote. As for the legal consequences, the false report fine stood at $800, which she paid grudgingly. The HOA lawsuit for the $37,000 in legal fees was settled out of court for $25,000, which apparently required her to liquidate most of her retirement savings. Her reputation in the HOA management community was thoroughly destroyed when someone created a Facebook page called Margaret Peaton's Greatest Hits, documenting her various overreaches. The final insult came when the new HOA board sent her a formal letter thanking her for her, quote, past service, unquote, and informing her that she was permanently banned from all HOA events and properties. Effective immediately. Tom said she tried to contest it, but couldn't find a lawyer willing to take the case. Her house sold at a significant loss 2 months later to a young couple who immediately painted it bright yellow, a color that would have given Margaret an aneurysm. They also installed a small free little library on the front lawn, right where everyone could see it. When I ran into the new owners at the farmer's market, they mentioned finding stacks of HOA violation notices in the attic, all filled out but never sent, for infractions like excessive dandelions and mailbox leaning 2 degrees off perpendicular. There must have been hundreds of them, the woman said, shaking her head, all dated and organized by street. It was actually kind of disturbing. Margaret Peaton, the iron-fisted ruler of Maple Ridge, had fallen from her self-appointed throne in spectacular fashion. The $800 fine, the $25,000 settlement, and the complete loss of her social standing and reputation in the community she tried so hard to control. It was a fitting end to her reign of terror. The last anyone heard, she was working as a receptionist at a property management company 2 hours away, where her duties specifically excluded any involvement with HOA operations. Her new boss, who'd done his homework, made that very clear in her employment contract. As I sit on my tiny home's porch now, watching the sunset over a peaceful Margaret-free Maple Ridge, I can't help but reflect on the whole bizarre episode. All I wanted was a quiet place to live sustainably. Instead, I got a front-row seat to the complete meltdown of a suburban dynasty. The new HOA board even sent me a fruit basket with a note. Thanks for your patience during our recent transition. While we cannot officially welcome you, as you're not in our jurisdiction, we look forward to being good neighbors. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about justice, and sometimes that justice comes with an $800 fine and a $25,000 legal settlement that sends a petty tyrant running for the hills.